Today we are looking at a case from the first part of the 19th century, so sit back as we go to Wales. William Edwards was born around the year 1790 in Pontypool, a town in the county of Monmouthshire in Wales. At the time, Pontypool was in transition. It had grown around the Hanbury ironworks, which had brought industry and employment to the area, and though still modest in size, it was known for its skilled tradesmen and growing commercial activity, a place where rural life met the first signs of industrial progress. He was a man of modest but respectable means. Born into a family of stonemasons, he learned the trade from his father, and while still in his early 20s, had established a small quarry on a parcel of land, where he was able to combine his masonry skills with farming to make a steady living. William married a young lady named Rachael Williams in 1820. She was also from Pontypool and had been born in 1796. She'd occasionally worked at his parents' home, and it was through this employment that the two became acquainted. She had been raised in a family of respectability, who had installed in her the virtues of modesty, service and respect. Her mother worked as a dressmaker, crafting fine garments for local ladies, a trade that Rachael sometimes assisted with. She was known for her kindness and resilience, and was highly regarded by those who knew her. After their marriage, William and Rachael led what most in Pontypool considered a quiet, unremarkable life. Together they kept a modest home on the edge of town, a place that was not particularly warm nor unhappy. They employed a servant girl named Mary Morgan, and the days followed a familiar routine. William went out to work, while Rachael tended the home. She prepared meals and visited the market. She did not gossip in the streets or linger long at neighbours' doors. She kept to herself. Some had described her as a woman of gentle disposition, modest, well-spoken, and mild-mannered. But beneath this calm demeanour lay something colder, more callous, and quietly sinister. There was a detachment in her manner that, while easily overlooked at first, it seemed that she may be hiding darker intentions behind a surface of quiet civility. In early 1822, the couple left the farm and took over a public house called Cross Keys, located in the heart of Pontypool. The inn was a bustling place, frequented by locals and travellers alike. William still operated his quarry, while Rachael worked in the pub. She was now in an environment where she would see men from all walks of life, all of who would gather, exchange stories, share views, and spread gossip. And now, Rachael also started to drink. Although they maintained an outward appearance of being happy, the marriage was far from harmonious. Whispers circulated that Rachael had once threatened her husband with a knife, a rumour that hinted at deeper troubles behind closed doors. They had begun sleeping in separate rooms, and it was becoming increasingly clear that their domestic life was marked by persistent tension. On Monday, the 24th of June 1822, William and Rachael, accompanied by a woman named Mary Sandbrook, tended the fair in Abergavenny. It was a lively gathering, one of the largest in the region, drawing farmers, traders, and townsfolk from across the countryside. When they returned in the early evening, William was quieter than usual. He complained of fatigue, his face drawn and pale. That night he took to his bed and doubled over in pain. By morning, his condition had worsened. When the maid, Mary Morgan, went to his room, she found him sweating and complaining that he was feeling most unwell. She fetched the mistress, who immediately started to tend him. She then sent Mary out to buy some remedies. The following day he was still very poorly, so Mrs. Edwards prepared tea that was sweetened with milk, and she mixed in some powders, while Mary stayed by her mistress's side. Mr. Edwards drank his tea, but his condition did not improve. By mid-morning, Rachael decided that he needed additional medication and sent Mary out for laudanum, smelling salts and vinegar. By Thursday the 27th, the household had fallen quiet. William no longer had the strength to rise from his bed, his pain still evident, and although his door was closed, his groans could be heard throughout the house. They came at intervals, low, strained sounds that unsettled the silence. Rachael remained by her husband's bedside. She did not say much, but acted like the concerned wife. However, somewhat strangely, she did not call for a doctor. Outside, life for the people of Pontypool continued. They were unaware of what was going on behind the walls of the Cross Keys public house. The following day, Mrs. Edwards rose early and found that her husband was no better, but instead of going to get a doctor, she asked Mary to burn certain items: linen, clothes, even the teacups from what William had drunk. Rachael gave no reason, only the instructions to do it. Quietly and without question, Mary obeyed and threw the items onto the fire. Things were much the same on the Saturday. William's pain was evident, and Mrs. Edwards continued to attend him. Then in the early hours of Sunday the 30th of June, he died. The sudden death of William Edwards came as a shock to many in the town. He had been regarded as a healthy man and was known for his steady habits and unassuming nature, but the circumstances surrounding his demise were troubling. He had fallen ill over the course of a few days, suffering horrible symptoms before he died. When the local doctor examined the body, the cause of death was not immediately clear, but he couldn't ignore the growing suspicion that something was amiss. Certain signs, though subtle, raised alarms, symptoms that didn't quite align with any natural cause. His experience led him to wonder if this was no ordinary death, but the result of something far more sinister. A post-mortem was quickly arranged, and after doctors had examined the deceased man's stomach, they confirmed that the cause of death was arsenic poisoning. The discovery prompted a coroner's inquest, which concluded that the arsenic had been administered by Mr. Edwards' wife, Mrs. Rachael Edwards. She was formally charged and committed to stand trial. The servant girl, Miss Mary Morgan, was also charged as an accomplice. Rachael appeared completely unaware of the seriousness of her situation and showed no emotion when she and Mary were placed in a cart to be transported from Pontypool to the prison in Monmouth, accompanied by 2 constables. However, during the journey, she managed to supply the constables and the driver with alcohol, and the men got so drunk that Rachael and Mary were able to escape. When the news of this reached Pontypool, several local men sent off to find them. Thanks to their quick action, both women were discovered asleep at Trellock Woods, about 4 miles from Monmouth. They were then taken back into custody. A few days later, it was decided that the charges against Mary Morgan would be dropped, and it would only be her mistress, Mrs. Rachael Edwards, who would stand trial. Trial began at the court in Monmouth, in front of Justice Bailey, and went on into the night. Mrs. Edwards was charged with having administered arsenic to her husband in the town of Pontypool, which had resulted in his death. This indictment accused her of both murder and petty treason, a charge historically used when a wife killed her husband. In the dock, Mrs. Edwards appeared physically frail, but showed no signs of emotion or fear. At the direction of the judge, she was provided with a chair to sit on. Mr. Pearson represented the prosecution, and Mr. Campbell represented the defendants. The first witness to take the stand was Anne Williams, the aunt of Mrs. Edwards. Her testimony immediately drew attention in the courtroom and caused a visible stir among those gathered in the gallery. In a composed voice, she recounted that a week or so before Mr. Edwards had died, her niece had approached her with an unusual request to purchase white arsenic, along with a few other substances. Miss Williams claimed that Rachael had told her that they were needed to deal with a problem of mice in the house. Though arsenic could lawfully be purchased for some purposes, its deadly nature was well understood. Mrs. Williams detailed their conversation and suggested that although this may have seemed like a mundane request, she now believed that it was a carefully veiled pretext for something far more sinister. The most critical evidence came from 16-year-old Miss Mary Morgan, the maid who had worked in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Edwards. She told the court that the couple often argued and that they sometimes slept in separate beds and even separate bedrooms. She added that she had seen Mrs. Edwards threaten her husband with a knife and once heard her wish something bad would happen to him. Miss Morgan also noted that her mistress had been especially familiar with a man named James Lewis, though before she could say more, the defence led by Mr. Campbell objected to any insinuation of impropriety. He claimed to suggest that Mrs. Edwards had conducted herself in a manner unbecoming a respectable woman was both irrelevant and likely to unfairly influence the jury. He insisted that the moral character of the accused was not on trial. Mr. Justice Bailey concurred, ruling that such testimony should not be pursued unless it bore direct relevance to the matter at hand. When asked about the week leading up to Mr. Edwards' death, Miss Morgan said that her master had returned from the Abergavenny Fair with Mrs. Edwards and Mary Sandbrook, and that night he seemed to be unwell. She added that the next day, while Mr. Edwards was in bed, Mrs. Edwards sent her to Mr. Ebenezer Jones' shop to buy 3 pennyworth of what she called crow figs. Mr. Pearson, representing the prosecution, then interrupted and said to the court, "My lords, the term crow figs refers to the seeds of the strychnine tree, the most pernicious plants, the seeds of which contain a powerful poison known as strychnine. This substance, when ingested, causes violent and fatal effects, and the seeds are often employed for pest control, particularly to kill crows, hence the name." He added that it is well known that the same substance has been used for more sinister purposes, namely in poisonings, due to its potent and lethal qualities. After this, Miss Morgan continued her testimony. She told the court that on the Wednesday morning, she saw her mistress preparing breakfast for Mr. Edwards, and said that she saw her put tea in a pot, and then slice 2 of the crow figs into small pieces, which she added to the pot, before pouring the tea into a cup with some sugar and cream. She went on to say that Mrs. Edwards then went upstairs with the tea and some bread and butter, which she gave to her husband. By now the courtroom had fallen into a tense silence. The young girl's testimony was drawing a damning portrait of Mrs. Edwards' actions, each detail adding weight to the growing sense that she had played a direct role in her husband's death. The young servant girl continued, saying that on Thursday morning her mistress handed her a basin of milk and asked her to take it upstairs to Mr. Edwards. She said that she did as she was told, though with growing unease, and when she returned, her mistress asked her whether she had delivered it, and she told her that she had, but confessed to the court that she had become afraid of Mrs. Edwards, as she thought that she might do harm to her husband, and blamed the deed on her. She went on to say that Mary Sandbrook, who had been away working earlier in the week, returned to the house on the Friday evening, which offered her some comfort. Yet on the Saturday morning, she did not see her master, nor did she go to his room. Instead, she called to her mistress from the stairs and noticed she was holding a key to the master's room. Normally, she said, the key was left in the door, but on this day, the door stayed firmly closed. It was Saturday, so Mary said she had to go to the market and spent much of the day out of the house. By now, Mary was talking in a very shaky voice and said that in the early hours of Sunday the 30th of June, she was in the kitchen when her mistress descended the stairs and told her that Mr. Edwards had died. After a brief pause, she continued. He said that she did not return to her bed, and at first light, she was sent to fetch a woman named Betty Cadwallader. She then said that Mrs. Edwards made a peculiar request, as she handed her a vessel and instructed her to carry it out to the canal just beyond the front of her house and wash it along with a bucket. Miss Morgan said that she had never done such a thing before. When asked what the vessel contained, she replied that it contained a yellowish liquid, something that looked like vomit. Miss Morgan then took a breath before saying that later that day, Mrs. Edwards sent her to the home of Anne Williams to tell her not to mention anything about going to Mr. Ebenezer Jones' shop to purchase arsenic. Miss Morgan said that she did as she was told, and when she returned, she was instructed to wash out the small basin that had traces of milk. The testimony painted a picture of Mrs. Rachael Edwards being a woman who had meticulously planned her husband's death. Yet throughout it all, Rachael remained composed, listening quietly as the witnesses gave their accounts. Although Miss Mary Morgan's testimony initially appeared compelling, it began to unravel under the scrutiny of the defence. She was asked by Mr. Campbell, the defence barrister, why she had told the coroner's jury that on the Wednesday that Mr. Edwards had dressed in his work clothes and gone out for the entire day. Miss Morgan hesitated, then said quietly, "Because that's what my mistress told me to say." There was a gasp in the courtroom before the defence counsel reminded her that she had been under oath when she had given that earlier testimony. Looking quite frightened, she then admitted that she had also falsely told the coroner's jury that Mr. Edwards had left the house on the Friday morning and returned only late that night. Her credibility began to crumble further when she confessed that she had failed to tell the coroner's jury about seeing her mistress slice her crow's figs into the teapot. She said that at the time, she believed her mistress's explanation that the seeds were to kill crows. When she left the witness box, there were whispers throughout the courtroom, as although her testimony had brought several details to light, it was going to be difficult to know what could be believed, and what might have been twisted, exaggerated, or entirely false. As new witnesses were called to the stand, the focus of the courtroom began to shift. The atmosphere changed noticeably when the last witness was called, a gentleman who spoke in Mrs. Edwards' defence. He gave his account with steady conviction, saying that he had known Mr. and Mrs. Edwards for some time and had never observed any quarrel between them or cause for suspicion. According to him, their household had always appeared peaceful and free from any kind of strife that might hint at a darker undercurrent. There had been, he claimed, no signs of violence, no public arguments, nothing to suggest that the bond between husband and wife was anything but amiable. Following this, the judge summed up the case. Turning to the jurors, he said that they were to treat the matter with the utmost care and that they must disregard anything that they might have heard beyond the courtroom, such as gossip, speculation, or public opinion. He then reminded them that they must focus solely on the evidence presented during the trial in order to reach a verdict based only on what truly had come to light in the proceedings. He said that two central questions demanded their consideration. First, did the deceased, Mr. William Edwards, die as a result of having arsenic introduced to his stomach? Second, was the arsenic administered by the defendant? On the first point, the learned judge reviewed the testimony of medical experts. Their statements, he said, left little doubt as to how Mr. William Edwards had died. Arsenic was present in the stomach, in a quantity sufficient to cause death. He then went on to recount the full extent of the evidence relating to the second question, whether Mrs. Rachael Edwards was responsible for administering the poison. He carefully outlined whether testimony of Mary Morgan and Anne Williams had been corroborated by the chemists and warned the jury to approach the rest of their statements with great caution, especially, he said, that of Mary Morgan, whose evidence had been riddled with contradictions and admitted falsehoods. He then told the jury that the following facts were beyond disputes: that Anne Williams had indeed purchased arsenic, that the defendant had full and constant access to the deceased during his illness, and that no physician had been called to examine Mr. Edwards, in spite of his worsening condition. Looking straight at the jury, Mr. Justice Bailey asked them to review the remaining evidence with care, and concluded by saying that he hoped that Almighty God will guide them to the truth in this most solemn and tragic matter. It was now 11 p.m, and the jury retired to consider their verdict. They did so for 2 hours, before returning to the courtroom, where every eye turned towards them. However, before the verdict was delivered, the defendant, Mrs. Rachael Edwards, was given the opportunity to speak. She said, "In this solemn hour, I stand before you, weak and burdened with grief. I beseech you to consider my words carefully. I have loved my husband dearly, and I mourn his loss beyond measure. If I have done wrong, I ask for mercy from my Lord, and from you all. I pray that justice be tempered with compassion. Be mindful that I am a woman, flawed perhaps, but not without remorse. My only wish is that my soul may be cleansed, and that the truth may bring peace to the living and the dead." Her words were spoken with humility and sorrow. Some in the courtroom were visibly moved, while others sat in silence, their expressions unreadable. Whatever sympathy her statement may have stirred, the jury were now about to deliver their verdict. The foreman then stood and announced the decision. They found the defendant, Mrs. Rachael Edwards, guilty of murder. Now turning to Mrs. Edwards, Mr. Justice Bailey said that she had been found guilty of the most serious crime, and there could be but one punishment: death by hanging. Following the trial, she was taken to the prison in Monmouth, where she received spiritual guidance from the chaplain. At her request, 2 Welsh-speaking clergymen also visited, praying with her in what she called the language of the heart. Her final days were marked by deep remorse. On the Thursday before her execution, her 2 sisters visited to say goodbye. In their presence, Rachael made a written confession and farewell address that she asked to be shared with the public. In it, she acknowledged her guilt and urged others to learn from her mistakes. She implored families to live with love, fidelity, and devotion to God. On the day of her execution, Friday the 16th of August 1822, a large and solemn crowd gathered as she walked to the scaffold. She again confessed her crime and accepted her sentence as just. Her final address read, "In the solemn position which I now stand, I feel the need to offer a few words of warning and guidance. I hope that coming from me and from this place, they will leave a lasting impression on your hearts and minds. I beg you, in the name of the blessed Saviour I am soon to meet, to consider this sincerely. Mothers, raise your children with knowledge of the reverence of the Lord. Husbands and wives, never take for granted the sacred bond that unites you. Always strive to bring comfort and happiness to one another. Stay away from the destructive influence of bad company. Be faithful in public and private worship. Read your Bible. Nurture a spirit of faith, and never neglect the power of prayer, especially prayer as a family." Following these words, Rachael Edwards was hanged, and afterwards her body was delivered to the surgeon for dissection. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next Brief Case